Hello and welcome. Today we begin with the latest updates from Kenya, where the state funeral was held for the country's former Prime Minister and opposition leader Raila Odinga. But his funeral followed a fatal chaos at the stadium where his mortal remains were on public viewing. Take a look at these visuals on your screen. The video shows the mayhem that ensued in the capital of Nairobi after thousands gathered to pay their last respects to the deceased leader. The mourners pushed through a VIP gate to enter the stadium. The security forces then fired warning shots into the air to disperse the crowds. This led to complete chaos as people scurried and screamed while some fell onto the ground. Eyewitness videos from the stadium showed white smoke erupting as the security forces fired tear gas. Pandemonium killed at least 3 people.
I woke up very early in the morning to come to Parliament, but when we heard that they moved the viewing from there to the stadium, we ran from there to here.
I have been seeing him, and also I have been voting for him. But today, we have lost someone really important in the world. So I came here today to just say my last thank you.
After the fatal incident, Odinga's state funeral was held in another Nairobi stadium, where a stampede broke out as people rushed to see his coffin and left dozens of people injured. Odinga's funeral was attended by Kenyan President William Ruto. Regional leaders like Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud were also in attendance. Ruto had earlier declared a 7-day mourning period in the country, while the Kenyan Parliament observed a minute of silence in Odinga's honor.
Every once in a generation, there comes a leader whose impact transcends their moment, whose courage inspires change, and whose vision shapes destinies. My brother, Raila Odinga, was one such leader. Across space and time, there are few exceptional persons who, when summoned by the call of history, rise to meet the challenges and opportunities of their time with indomitable vigor, with absolute conviction, and with unwavering valor.
Odinga's mortal remains will now be taken to Western Kenya, which is his family's home region. More crowds are expected to throng the place before a private burial service on the 19th of October. Odinga died of cardiac arrest at the age of 80 in southern India. He was there for medical treatment for an undisclosed illness. His death triggered a huge outpour of grief across Kenya. Odinga served as Prime Minister from 2008 to 2013. However, he never succeeded in acquiring the presidential seat, despite 5 attempts. He was affectionately known as Baba, which means father, and was arguably the most important political figure in Kenya of his generation. He played a crucial role in returning the country to multi-party democracy in the 1990s and is also credited as the main force behind a widely praised constitution passed in 2010. Odinga's death has left a leadership vacuum in Kenya's opposition ahead of a potentially volatile election in 2027. Now, for more on this story, we have with us Nerima Wako, who is a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, what does this deadly incident reveal about the current political climate and the relationship between Kenya's security forces and the opposition supporters following Raila Odinga's passing?
It shows that in moments of mass grief and mobilization, the state is quick to default to use force rather than de-escalation, which suggests a securitized mindset toward political expression It also reveals that symbolic moments, because we're talking about a funeral, public viewings, they carry heightened risks in our country, especially in regards to politics. And it appears that those in power seem deeply fearful of large gatherings being leveraged into a political mobilization or a protest, hence that heavy-handed posture. And so what we're seeing is underneath all of that, there's a sense of fragility and a very fragile political climate where the optics of control matter as much as substance, and where public grief or solidarity becomes a site of contensation. And finally, the deaths intensify the narratives among opposition supporters about being under siege, or reinforcing these grievances that the system or the state itself is unwilling to afford them the space.
Right. And how has the government justified this use of force against mourners? And what mechanisms exist to ensure accountability for the actions of the security personnel involved?
So the official line being utilized is that the gatherings have become unruly or threatened security, that mourners attempted to breach controlled areas, and that the use of force was necessary to restore public order and public safety. However, authorities often frame these actions as responding to uncontrolled crowds or security breaches, emphasizing the force used was to disperse rather than to harm. Sometimes the narrative is to portray that the mourners as provocateurs or agents of disorder, shifting responsibility for escalation onto the gathering. And what exists are legal and institutional frameworks like the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, which has a mandate to investigate deaths and excessive use of police force. We also have the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, which could bring criminal charges and investigations to find wrongdoing or unlawful use of firearms. And we also have the judiciary and the courts and parliamentary oversight committees. However, there are gaps in these institutions because they do lack independence or the capacity, and a lot of political will is required and timely action. So civil society and media does put pressure from victims and their families, and also international human rights bodies and local human rights institutions do monitor the pressure on compliance.
Right. And with Raila Odinga's passing and the ensuing unrest, what are the potential implications for Kenya's political stability and the future of opposition movements in the country, considering the elections coming up in 2027?
Raila Odinga was a dominant figure whose moral and political weight held together diverse opposition strands. So his passing opens a contested space. Basically, people are questioning who can command similar legitimacy and bridge communities and hold a coalition together. So without a unifying figure, opposition movements may splinter, weakening their collective bargaining power. And this does leave us quite vulnerable to cooptation and division. And the deaths, especially of the people who came to mourn, and the heavy security response could lead to cycles of protests and retaliation and repression. So grief may evolve into anger and political mobilization. However, the state doubling down on using security apparatus to manage political dissent rather than open democratic engagement is shrinking civic space. But I do believe that this moment could catalyze new youth, new faces in politics, community-based movements, and, roles of oversight. So I believe that it's an opportunity for political innovation beyond traditional party lines.
All right. Nerima, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
Thank you.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point. Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.